At the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia in 1876, Americans had their first opportunity to view Japanese art and culture. In fact, 9.5 million people visited the Japanese pavilion. And from that Japanese exposure, the crazy quilt fad suddenly swept the country, with women making quilts from silk. Fans embellished with decorative stitches appeared on many crazy quilts. Now, this quilt maker used her fan as a sampler to try out a variety of embroidery stitches. And you know, she didn't repeat a single stitch. The fabrics are wonderful. Now, they may have even come from her ball gown. And I love this treasured bit of velvet with the embroidered children. The whole quilt is just beautiful. Well, late in the 19th century, a fan pattern was published and sold as a repeated block pattern. The quilt maker repeated 4 blocks for this design. Once again, the embroidery stitches combined with the piecing give the impression of a Victorian crazy quilt. The fan was a usual part of a ballroom accessory, which was carried or it was hung on a cord from the belt. And then, in addition to a fan, a girl probably carried a tiny party bag, just big enough to hold a handkerchief and a powder compact. After 1912, women's personal fans gradually went out of style, but the fan as a quilt patch has remained popular. Alice Brooks introduced grandmother's fan pattern number 5009. Now, Alice Brooks was a fictitious designer used by Old Chelsea Station in New York. Now, this quilt was started from that pattern in the 1930s, but it was never finished. Now, the fan's edge is scalloped with a set-in piece on the top, and then half fans are used on the side, so the sides are straight. Well, perhaps it was just too complicated to set in the curves. A quilt maker started this fan in the 1950s, and she used rickrack to turn under the top edges. The pieces are just perfect sizes to cut from scraps. I finished it recently, and I bordered it with a feed sack from my great Aunt Edna. Now, the whole pattern reminds me of this one called Friendship Fan by Laura Wheeler. Now, she was also a fictitious designer from Old Chelsea Station. The pattern suggests a gathering of friends can quickly do a quantity of blocks, for they are easily pieced. I have to agree. My sister Patty made this quilt just recently using a pattern with 7 different wedges in it. There's 8 different fabrics in this quilt. And then she fussy cut the quarter circles. They are beautiful. So let's see what the fanfare is all about. I believe quilters originally used their dinner plates to make their own fan patterns. But we're so lucky because now modern quilters have a big stack of paper plates in their kitchen. And all you need to do is just take a circle like this as a pattern, just fold it in half once, and then fold it a second time so that you've folded it into quarters. And then just take a teacup and mark off the quarter circle for the inside of the fan along here. Cut that off. You need to add a seam allowance there. And then this part right here just gets divided up into the number of wedges that you need. Well, that sounds simple. But I already made a template out of template plastic. I'm just doing a miniature fan. And my template is 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And I actually tapered it in 1/4 inch on each end and then just rounded the top and the bottom. The little quarter circle comes from a 4.5 inch piece of template, and we'll just divide that into 4ths when we're ready. We're moving. Now, I'm using all shades of blue. I'm using 4 different values of blue for my fan. The darkest ones are on the outside edge, and then they get lighter as they go in towards the middle, with the very lightest in the center. There's 7 different wedges, and I'm using the 2 outside fabrics the same, and then I'm just working in pairs in towards that single wedge. And then I just selected a touch of pink just to pull all those fabrics together. Well, I have strips laid out. We're going to do assembly line sewing. Forget that scrap stuff. So I have strips that are 3 inches, or they could even be 3.5 inches wide, and in whatever length you want. But they are in numbered order from 1 through 7, the 2 outside fabrics being the same, then working in pairs in towards the center so that there's just that single center piece. Okay, I'm going to take number 2 and flip it right sides together to number 1, number 4 to 3, number 6 to 5, and then number 7's just sitting alone. So then stack your pairs already right sides together into one big stack. Just keep that 7 on the bottom. Okay, now take your template, and I did already draw a grain line on it. It's pretty important to have your grain line. So just take your piece right along the edge and keep your grain line going up and down and just trace around that template. You can use a permanent marking pen, anything, just so you can see it. And now to economize on the fabric, just turn the wedge up and put it right next to it so there's no space in between. Draw another template. Okay, so you're just going to keep on going up and down the whole way across. And of course, I have a stack that's ready to go. You can take your ruler as your straight edge and just line it up on the straight and cut it on straight angles, and then just pick up your scissors and cut those little curves. Oh, this works so easy. One little curve there, and then another little curve here. And we are ready to assembly line sew. So just put your stack right to the left of your needle. It's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. They're already right sides together, so you do need to have your stiletto to help pick it up and take it apart in pairs. And I already took one too many. I'll get it straightened up. So just line up the 1/4 inch foot, whatever you have to achieve that 1/4 inch seam, and just take the stacks one by one and feed them through. These are such little guys. I think maybe I should have done a larger one. Ruby McKim has a pattern in her 101 Patchwork Patterns book called The Grandmother's Fan, and it has only 6 wedges in it. It is a very large fan. I think that the wedge is about 6 or 7 inches long. So I was thinking you'd have to have a large turkey plate to use the plate as the pattern. Okay, I have my pairs all sewn together, and I'm just going to press those seams, set the seams, and then just press these pieces open and flat so that the seams are right behind that top wedge. Now at this point, you want to make sure you keep them in order, because if you start clipping these apart and getting confused, oh, you'll lose your pattern. So now go ahead and take them, clip them apart into pairs. The first 2 pairs are the 2 that are going to be sewn together. Check and make sure those are correct. The 3rd pair has that single wedge sewn on the end. And actually, they look pretty good. Check now, because then you're just going to flip these pieces right sides together and assembly line. So it's so much easier to rearrange now than to unsew later. Just not fond of that at all. Okay, so just get these going right through there, same 1/4 inch seam, and you would be having a whole series of fans going one after the other in identical order. Assembly line sew, this piece, and that actually is the last step for the fans, because you're just going to take these pieces right here. You'll have 4 in a row, and then the set of 3. That single one is in the center. Flip it right sides together, and we are done with the fan. I've been thinking about the ladies from the early 1900s and how they just decided that fan was too old-fashioned and they'd set it aside. Actually, I really appreciate that fan, especially in church when I'm having one of my power surges, just get out my personal fan, look at the choir, and they're all doing the same thing. Okay, now take the fan, and you want to press the seams in one direction. And the way you press the seams depends on how you're going to finish this fan. right there. Now the first way that you can finish it is with a piece of non-woven fusible interfacing. It's 2 inches wide, and I just place the right side of the fan against the fusible side of the interfacing, and then I did a 1/4 inch seam right along that top edge. And then you just trim this fan away. Actually, you could go ahead and cut into the fabric, into the seam, as you trim that fusible away. And just take this, get rid of it. You want to take the interfacing, roll it to the back side now. Use your fingers to smooth out that edge and curve it around there. You can actually press that, crease that. Now the background square is 5 1/4 inches. So when you place that fan on the background, it should be evenly placed from the corners right here, about 1 inch in on both corners. The raw edges are turned under, so all you need to do is have steam in your iron. Just press that flat, and that particular part is done. 1 down. Second way you might finish it is with a piece of lace. This has been pre-gathered. It's 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch wide lace, and I just took and sewed a 1/4 inch seam right around the top. You need to have approximately 9 inches of lace per fan, and then from the right side just fold that seam under, press right along there, and this one is going to go right on that background square. And if you need to, maybe do a little pulling out or easing in to get that on. And then the last way is with a piece of rickrack. I think this is my favorite method. I think rickrack is coming back in style. So I just lined up the edge of the rickrack with the raw edge of the fan. Just sewed that 1/4 inch seam, and then all you need to do is just fold that raw edge under, and you just see half of the rickrack along the top edge. Now the piece of rickrack that I was using was really old. Do you know the price on that rickrack was actually 8 cents for 3 yards? Pretty amazing. Now just take this one, place it right on there. Now the 1/4 circle comes from that 4 1/2 inch circle template. You just place the fabric with the interfacing, fusible side to right side, sew the circle first, and then you go ahead and cut it into 4s. You're going to go a half one way and then cut right down through the middle. Just take your fingers, pull that interfacing around to the back, smooth that edge, and then this piece will just get fused right on top. Let's get that all lined up and just fuse it in place. Now to finish the fan off, all I need to do is a stitch in the ditch technique right along the fabric and the rickrack along there, and then you could use a blind hem stitch with invisible thread on the 1/4 wedge. Take stitches along there, and your fans will be finished. Let me finish my stack of fans, and I'll show you a number of different layouts. Playing with these blocks is almost as fantastic as playing with the log cabin blocks because there are so many different layouts. Now this particular layout is called the Mohawk Trail. Ruby McKim named it Mohawk Trail, and then Grandma Dexter called this layout Rocky Road to Jericho. It certainly does look rocky, doesn't it? Now there's a total of 16 fan blocks. It's 4 across and 4 down, an even number so that we can do these layouts. Now if I just take the center 4 blocks, turn them all in towards the center so they're meeting right in the middle. This was named by Kansas City Star, one other name called the Imperial Fan. Looks great. Well, I'm going to have some fun, play with these blocks, turn them around, and show you some different layouts. Nancy Page called this one the Spanish Fleet in 1935. Ruby Duncan called this one Drunkard's Path in the Quilt World magazine in 1980. This is an unnamed fan set published by the Dakota Farmer in 1926. Laura Wheeler designed this one for Old Chelsea Station out of New York. But of all of the patterns, I decided I liked the Mohawk Trail the best. So I'm just going to take these pieces and just invert them all along the sides, turn them right back to the Mohawk trail. Now when you're laying these pieces out, you want to make sure that you can create the rickrack going in a straight line, or the trim going in a straight line across these points. So even if you need to exchange some of your blocks and turn them around so that they fit well together, that would be a really wise thing to do. Let me see. Okay, I've got some piece over here, 2 pieces, and then I'm just going to take those corners and flip them around. Actually, the best way to see this is just to step back, squint at it, make sure you have it in order. It looks good. Actually, I like to climb up a set of stairs and look back down at my quilt just to make sure it's in the right order. This looks good. Now we're going to sew it together in vertical rows. And I always like to do row 1 and 2 as the first 2 rows. You flip 2 right sides together onto row 1, and just so you keep it in order, you can stack it so the first pair is on the top. And then these can actually also be stacked top to bottom. Keep that one in the top, that's row 3, and this is row 4. So then just turn them so that they're in your sewing order. I'm going to put row 3 and 4 right over there. And then all you need to do is just assembly line sew. Pick those top 2 up, line up the outside edges, make sure they're in good order, and sew these pairs together. And then just keep on assembly line sewing down vertical rows. After you finish all of your vertical rows, then you're just going to go across the other way without clipping your connecting threads. Let me get this top sewn together, and then I'll show you how to make some fancy flowers. I finished my top, and I just kept right on going. I added a 2-inch border around the outside edge in this color of yellow just to pull out the yellow from the fans. And then I added 5-inch background borders the whole way around the outside edge because I wanted to fancy these fans up with some flowers. I'm going to do some applique flowers just in the corner. Now I thought I'd show you a finished one so you can get a good idea. This one is the same, the Mohawk Trail, but it has a folded border, just a touch of pink to frame off the blocks, and then the flowers go the whole way around with this vine that just curves in and out around the corners. Let me show you how to do these applique flowers. Now the product that I'm using is light to medium weight, non-woven fusible interfacing. Oh, makes the job so easy, just turns under the edges perfectly. Now I already have my leaves started, and this is what I did. I have pre-printed leaves, or you could just trace your own leaves on the smooth side of the fusible interfacing, and then pair up the dotted side of the fusible with the right side of the fabric. I set my machine for a very small stitch. Oh, you don't want to do any taking out here. This is 1.5 or 20 stitches to the inch. I'm using needle down, and I'm just sewing right around the leaves on the line. Boy, am I moving. So once you have the leaves sewn on the line, then just take sharp scissors and trim 1/8 inch away. Let me just zoom right around here and trim along here. I'm doing a number of different styles of leaves and flowers. I'm just going to cut the tips off right there, and then in the fusible interfacing, just make a little nick large enough for a straw. Boy, these magical tools. Now this is a fat straw. It's a free straw, fat-free straw, and I'm just going to put it right in the hole. And then you take a ballpoint bodkin. This is a tool that has a ball in the end, and that's what's important. Ballpoint bodkin, and then you just turn the fabric so that the fabric's on the end of the straw. Turn it right side out. Now the leaf, you do need to do twice. Do 1/2. Put the straw back in and push a second time. And then you can just run your ball around in the inside, smooth out those edges, and want some crisp points. So I'm just going to go ahead and take my stiletto and just pick out those points, make them crisp. Now I did another style of flower. This is the little yellow one I thought I'd pull in with the border, and then a little trumpet flower. It's so cute. Now I decided that I would just put the flowers down in the corners like this. So to connect them, I cut a piece of bias. It's only 1 inch wide, and I pressed it in half wrong sides together. And then could have done the plate trick, but all I did was just place the flowers as I'd like to see them, and then I just curved the bias and placed the bias on the inside of the curve, did a 1/4 inch stitch along there, and then whenever I'm finally ready to fuse this, I'm just going to pull this out like this and pin it in place. Now I'm going to put flowers on the ends to cover up the raw edges, and then leaves right here on the corners. I'll just fuse this down, and then all I need to do is just stitch around it with some invisible thread, blind hem stitch, and it'll be great. Now I also have another layout of the fan pattern. Geez, these fans just go on forever. Now this one just has the fan set together with solid squares, and the same vine and the flowers going around the outside edge. Well, I took those fans that I finished with the yellow rickrack. I just love it. Now the solid square is cut exactly the same size as the fan. The side triangles come from one large square that is 7.5 inches cut in force. The corners are 4-inch squares cut on one diagonal. Just place those pieces around the outside edge, and you have another fantastic fan quilt. Now we're going to turn the fans and the flowers into one fancy wall hanging. My sister Pat did this one. It's 26 inches square, and there are a total of 7 fans in it, 3 in the very center for the flowers, and then 4 for the outside corners. There's the 3 stems, and then you can go ahead, add some borders around the outside edge, and right in the center, put some applique flowers. Those are very patty colors, that purple and turquoise. I love it. Now, the very center of it is a 16-inch background square, and I drew a line up the center for the center stem, and then 2 curved lines off to each side. The stems come from 1.5 inch wide bias strips that are actually pressed wrong sides together, and then you just line up the raw edge, place it with the line, and then stitch a 1/4 inch along there, then press it over and stitch a blind hem stitch right along here. Now those 2 side pieces are the same bias, but you put the bias on the inside of the curve like this, stitch along here so that when you fold it out over, it actually covers over that center strip. Okay, so do this side and the other side. Oh, we've got a 6-inch square cut on one diagonal. You just stitch across here and then fold it down. Now, are you ready for the magic? Ta-da! I knew I was good. It's completely sewn together now, so you can see how they overlap. The blind hem stitch is on all 3 sides, and then to finish off the background square, you take 2 11-inch squares, cut them on one diagonal, and then just put them on all 4 sides. You can work on 2 sides, fold them out, remaining 2 sides, fold them out, and that looks good. So the 7 fans have some techniques that you've already seen. Now the very center ones, the 3 in the middle, have fusible interfacing actually up the sides and across the top. You need to have a larger piece of fusible than I originally showed you. You're going to make 2 fans alike and then one of them different. But each one of them have those 7 wedges in there. So let's take the different one. That'll be the center one. We'll place it right there. Take the 2 that are identical. Put those off to the side, see if we can kind of get them tweaked just right. Now they have raw edges across the bottom, so we need to cover those up with the calyx pieces. Now you're going to want to sew the whole way around the outside edge, cut a little hole right in it so you can turn it. When they're placed on top, they'll completely cover off the raw edges. Let's get those in, line them up, looking good. Now, we have the borders. They are 5-inch borders we're going to put on all 4 sides. And to fill up the corners, we have fans that actually just need to have a narrow strip of fusible. You don't need to stitch down the sides because they will actually be stitched in when you sew the borders. And the calyx is the same thing. They have raw edges. They'll fit in there perfectly. Now you can go ahead and do some applique flowers like this. This one is so much fun with the little French knots right in the center. 1 flower, 2 leaves, and those are going to be placed right in the centers of each one of the borders, around the outside edge. Looking good. Now this one has fans in the corners. You might want to do something like this one. Very similar, except the fans are missing in the corners. It's just applique flowers around the whole outside edge. Beautiful stitching right in here. Well, I hope you can sound the trumpets, enjoy the fanfare with these fantastic quilts.